Let's talk about what's really happening to the body when a dancer goes on point. When up on point, the ankle is exposed to forces about 12 to 13 times the dancer's body weight. That's a massive amount of pressure, especially compared to being barefoot. So all this increased force and muscle demand can really raise the risk of injury, especially for dancers who start point too early or don't yet have the strength, stability, or control to handle it safely. Welcome to the Ballet Science Podcast, where we bring science into the studio to help dancers of all ages and abilities give their best performance, both on stage and off, and reveal how the science of ballet is beneficial for everyone who moves. I'm Caroline Simpkins, a former ballerina turned researcher, and today's episode kicks off a short series diving into one of the biggest questions ballet teachers hear all the time. When am I ready for point? Dancing on point is one of the most iconic elements of ballet. It's what most of us picture when we think of legendary ballerinas floating across the stage or even the ballerinas in our music boxes. For young dancers, starting point is a major milestone. It's exciting, it feels like a big step forward in their training, and it really symbolizes their dedication to the art form. But while many dancers hope to get on point quickly, the reality is it's a complex process. There are a lot of pieces that need to fall into place before a dancer is truly ready. Physically, dancers need a pretty specific combination of qualities to dance on point safely. That includes good ankle range of motion, especially the ability to point the foot so that it's in line with the tibia or the shin bone, strong tendus, solid core and leg strength, and proper alignment. Ideally, a dancer should also be able to achieve about 90 to 100 degrees of plantar flexion at the ankle during a releve, where plantar flexion is the anatomical term for pointing the foot. Most experts agree that dancers should have at least 2 years of ballet training under their belt before starting point work. And point is generally not recommended for those only taking one ballet class a week or for dancers who have limited ankle or foot mobility. Alternatively, dancers who take multiple classes a week and have the necessary range of motion often develop better proprioception, which helps them manage the unique demands of point work. Still, despite all these physical benchmarks, many teachers continue to rely on one of the simplest measures, chronological age. It's often used as a rough guideline, even though it doesn't always tell the whole story. Most dancers start point training around the age of 12, which also happens to be right around the time that puberty kicks in. Just because two dancers are the same age doesn't mean that their bodies are developing at the same rate. Chronological age doesn't always match up with bone age, and there can be big differences in how and when girls go through puberty. Around ages 10 to 12, there's a big jump in growth. Height increases rapidly, and so does body mass. But this growth doesn't happen in a neat, predictable way. Every dancer's body develops at its own pace. Starting point during this phase of rapid growth can come with some challenges. First, the growth plates in the bones are still remodeling, and that makes them more vulnerable to stress. Second, because bones grow faster than muscles and tendons, dancers might see a temporary dip in balance and coordination. Those motor patterns they've worked hard to perfect can become less reliable. Third, the musculoskeletal system is still developing, which means more strain on muscles and ligaments, increasing the risk of injury. And finally, the bones in the feet don't fully harden or ossify until around age 18. Starting point too early could potentially interfere with that process, but it's important to note that there's currently no strong medical evidence showing that starting point during a growth spurt causes long-term damage to the developing foot. But it is something that teachers, dancers, and parents need to consider carefully. Injuries related to point often show up in the ankles, knees, and feet. So what are the big culprits? Poor technique, overuse, fatigue, and weak hip muscles, which can affect alignment and stability. Things like ankle sprains and posterior ankle impingement are common and often linked to starting point too soon. Wearing poorly fitted pointe shoes or dancing with improper technique can contribute to issues like retrocalcaneal bursitis, which is inflammation near the Achilles tendon, arthritis in the big toe joint, and sesamoiditis, which is pain under the ball of the foot. Today, I'm going to share the findings from a research paper published in 2022 in the Journal of Dance Medicine and Science titled Determining Pointe Readiness in Young Adolescent Female Dancers, a Systematic Review. The goal of this systematic review was twofold. First, to look at the different tests being used in the dance world, and second, to explore the types of injuries that can happen when dancers start pointe training. This review is based on 8 observational studies published between 1985 and 2019. Participants ranged in age from 8 to 20, with anywhere from 2 to 14 years of dance experience. Altogether, the review covered 260 young female dancers, 100 who hadn't started pointe yet, 76 who were already dancing on pointe, and 10 non-dancers for comparison. The studies in this review showed that there are lots of different ways to test if a young dancer is ready for pointe, but overall there's not much agreement because everyone uses different methods. For example, one survey looked at 74 dance schools and found that out of 21 different things they checked before pointe, these 8 came up the most often: age, releve alignment and stability, years of experience, plie alignment and stability, current injuries, past injuries, upper body alignment and stability, and tendu. What's interesting is that how teachers evaluated dancers often matched up with how they performed on these tests. Some of the most common tests included things like the heel rise or releve test, which measures strength and stability, and plank tests that check core strength and pelvic alignment. One study found a strong link between the number of releves a dancer could do and their success at pointe. But other studies didn't find big differences between pre-pointe and pointe dancers on these tests, so some researchers suggest that these tests might be more useful for identifying specific issues rather than as a pass-fail for pointe readiness. Out of the 8 studies reviewed, 3 looked specifically at injuries related to pointe work, as well as injuries that happened before starting pointe or weren't directly linked to it. One interesting finding came from one of the studies who found that foot pressures were significantly higher when wearing pointe shoes compared to barefoot or even Demi-Pointe shoes. They suggested that using Demi-Pointe shoes as a sort of in-between step can help dancers gradually adjust to the extra pressure on their ankles and feet. Dancers who transitioned through Demi-Pointe shoes actually had fewer injuries in their lower legs, ankles, and feet compared to those who jumped straight into pointe shoes. So, what did this review actually tell us about pointe readiness? Well, to be honest, overall it didn't offer any strong conclusions that directly answered the main questions. But there were a few bright spots. 4 specific tests, releve, airplane, saute, and topple, stood out as the most reliable indicators of readiness for pointe work. Interestingly, half of the studies included in the review used 2 or more of these tests in combination, which seems promising. When these tests are used alongside other key factors like a dancer's age, physical maturity, strength levels, range of motion, and a teacher's professional judgment, they could help form a more complete and accurate picture of pointe readiness. So what's the big takeaway? While we do recommend screening dancers before they go on pointe, this review highlights a real gap in the scientific research. There's still a lack of solid data, consistent testing protocols, and strong statistical evidence. What we really need are more standardized, research-backed methods to help teachers assess readiness safely and hopefully prevent injuries down the road. The research we talked about today was published in the Journal of Dance Medicine and Science, so if you're curious to dive deeper, I'll include the full citation and a link to the article in the show notes. Thank you for joining me today for the Ballet Science Podcast. Whether you are a dancer, teacher, student, or simply curious about the mechanics behind movement, I appreciate you being here today. Each week, we will explore the intersection of science and ballet, from injury prevention and biomechanics to nutrition, mindset, and everything in between. If you enjoyed this episode, please follow this podcast, leave a review, and share it with your friends and dance community. If there are specific topics you'd like to hear about in future episodes, feel free to share them in the comments below. You can also follow Ballet Science on social media and visit our website at ballet.science for additional information. Thank you again for tuning in, and I look forward to seeing you next time on the Ballet Science Podcast.